All right, thank you everyone for coming here today. It's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Noel White, who is Ambassador of Ireland to Australia, and he's been here since February 2012, so that's about 1 year. Ambassador White started his career in the Department of Foreign Affairs in 1985, and since then he's held various positions, some of them actually in Brussels. So we're just reminiscing about the time in Brussels and the European School and so on and so on. So he was director of the permanent representation to the EU in Brussels. In the headquarters was director of Development Cooperation Division. He was a political administrator, the EU General Secretariat of the Council, again in Brussels, so he keeps coming back to Brussels all the time, and Director of Press and Information at headquarters. He has a very full job here, because not only is he ambassador to Australia, but also is accredited to New Zealand, Fiji, the Solomon Islands, and Papua New Guinea. So I guess you travel a lot. And so you tell us more about this. What it is, on the ground to be, ambassador of Ireland to Australia. Thank you very much. You have a challenging job. The title of your presentation is Stability, Jobs and Growth, Irish Presidency of the EU Council, and what it means to the Asia Pacific. We're going to talk about the Asia Pacific as well.
Thanks very much, Pascaline.
Thank you.
Pascaline, thank you very much. Good morning. I guess you can all hear me. Thank you. I thought it was probably excessive. It doesn't matter. We'll use it. We'll see how it goes. This allows me to move around apparently and to express myself. So bear with me for a moment while I battle with the technology. So it's going to fix this one because it doesn't actually work. But fear not. I have a horror of PowerPoint. Thank you very much. I lived through a part of my career which was very PowerPoint heavy. I'll just tell you this as an aside. And it was one of those areas where people would come to present their case about whatever, armed with 30 slides on a PowerPoint. A series of the same slides printed out. These slides would contain detailed, dense text on the wall. They would hand out all the text and then they would read it. So eventually you say to yourself, there's just too much sensory stuff going on here. And somehow we've lost the plot and it's complete and utter distraction. So this is simply to just add a little bit of colour at the back, and some of the slides are helpful and some of them are less helpful, and I'll try and navigate my way through them. But can I just say, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be here. It's my first time at the Europe Centre, and I'm very grateful for the kind invitation, and thank you, Pascaline, for your introduction. It is good to be here. I was meant to get down here, but as Pascaline has pointed out, I've got a few things on. So we try to grab these opportunities when they present themselves. Not just because I like to do it, but also it's useful for us, because for people like me, it makes me step back occasionally from the day-to-day stuff and think about what it is we're doing, what we're about. I'm working on the basis, well, that this is all entirely Chatham House rules and is going to end up on YouTube, but hey, hello out there in YouTube land. But look, we won't say anything too outrageous. I'll say a few bits and pieces about the presidency and about Ireland and about the European Union. And despite, as I was explaining to Pascaline earlier on, that I had a slight moment of panic yesterday evening when I spotted the reference to a relation between the EU and Asia at the bottom of all of that. As a good student, of course, you'll read the title before you sat down to prepare what you're going to do, not at the very end of it. But bear with me. I think I can scramble on the Asia slide if necessary. But I do want to talk to you about a couple of things this morning around the presidency and building around that, the Irish presidency, building around that into a little bit about Ireland today, because it's significant in terms of not just itself, but in terms also of its relationship with the European Union generally. And it is in many ways a miniature of the kind of challenges that are facing the European Union right across the board. I also want to say a little word about Ireland and building around that Ireland and what we call, I like to call Ireland in recovery, which is an important theme of ours at this stage. But look, just to come back to the presidency, we'll take the presidency from there, and we'll break it down into its bits. There is a program for the presidency, and I could stand up and read the entire program to you, probably conk out after about 5 minutes, and it would list off all the wonderful things that we're going to achieve in 6 months. But I don't think it would actually add to our store of knowledge. So I'll talk around it a bit, give you a sense of the broad themes that are out there to the extent that I can answer any questions that you might or might not have. I'll try and do that. So look, it's very good to be here. The presidency, many people, post-Lisbon, many people have written off the presidency. We can discuss that. But it has changed over the years. This is Ireland's 7th presidency since we acceded to the European Union, and then European Community was involved in 1973. This is our 7th time to take the presidency. It also happens to coincide with the 40th anniversary of our accession to the then European Community. The presidency has changed a lot over that time. Surprise, surprise. So has Ireland. So has Europe. I think one thing about the presidency, though, is that it is still an extremely onerous, and if I can find it here, I'll show it to you. It's still an extremely onerous task for any country, small or otherwise, any member state. This is one of the more relevant slides that I have today. 1,600 meetings, 180, etc., etc., 1,500 official delegates. Frankly, that's a flavour of the thing. I wonder about how much that will actually stand up to scrutiny in terms of meetings. It's about 1,600 is roughly formal meetings that are held in council. It probably doesn't touch on what happens in the Commission, Commission regulatory committees, the whole comitology procedure, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and the whole series of bilateral stuff that doesn't qualify as an official meeting and so on. For a small member state, for a small administration, which is what we are, we like to be as lean as we possibly can, and that's why you end up covering Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Solomon Islands, New Zealand, and Australia. And if you transfer that across into the European system, into the EU, you begin to get a sense that we try to play to our strengths and to use our resources as best we possibly can. It's not for me to say, but I'll say it anyway, that others generally we feel people have generally had a good experience of Irish presidencies down through the years, and we like to think as well that in some way size doesn't matter, and that being small hasn't been an impediment to producing or delivering an effective presidency. And it's something we can discuss as to how we measure effective presidencies. I suppose it's stating the obvious to say that Ireland has taken over the presidency at what is, frankly, a critical time in the affairs of the Union and the lives of its citizens. That's something we can say usually about any presidency. I think it's particularly true at the moment. But I think as one of the member states that's most seriously affected by the financial, economic, and fiscal crisis in which Europe has been engulfed, we in Ireland know all too well how important it is to learn from mistakes of the past, to address these problems and to get our economy up and running again. So in that sense, what you're seeing with Ireland at this stage is a situation where the problems in Ireland have elided extremely well the problems in Europe, or rather the challenges that face Ireland are European challenges. These are not just Irish challenges. And in that sense, it begins to fall into place. If I could say just a few words about Ireland and Europe first. I've pointed out already that it's our 7th presidency, 40 years and so on, and 40 years of transformation. If you take a small country like Ireland in 1973, and I know this because I was there at the time, we've changed. We've grown, we've changed, which we would have changed anyway, but we have changed in a particular orientation, a particular dynamic as a result of our membership of the European Union. Today in Ireland, you'll see the statisticians will tell you there are 6 times the number of people in higher education than was the case in 1973. There are 3 times as many women work outside the home than did in 1973. And for any of you who have been there over the past number of years, you'll have spotted that with EU support, we have actually built a modern infrastructure and a strong educational system, which is a million miles from what we knew in 1973. Now, when we joined the EEC, that is what it was. At that time, we traded almost entirely with our nearest neighbour, the UK. Today, Ireland is exporting something of the order of 54 billion euros worth of goods right across the EU. That is half of our total exports. This changes your economy, it subsequently changes your society. But Irish companies are now exporting high-tech goods around the world as well, including here in Australia, where they seem to find a very receptive market, at least to say. In terms of foreign direct investment, Ireland is now host to over 1,000 foreign companies. And we feel they're critical to our capacity to achieve a recovery and to strengthen our economy. They have become very much part of our landscape. At a higher level, the concept of peace, the ideal of peace, mutual respect, is something within the EU, is something which played out very strongly and very well in the Irish context, in particular in Northern Ireland. And the role that the EU has played there has very often been downplayed, but I always avail of these occasions, as do many of my colleagues, to point out that the EU was there beside us right through this, not just in terms of the practical assistance that it provided, the financial assistance, the support that it gave to the Ireland Fund and cross-community support to the peace program and so on, but also as a concept of governance and a way to bring communities together. We shouldn't underestimate the role that the EU has played. As I say, it's often forgotten, so let's avail every opportunity to put it out there. We don't take Europe and we don't take European unity for granted. We have always, as a member state, we have always thought long and hard about how we want the EU to evolve, how we want to fit within it. We have, after all, conducted 8 referenda. I believe we have the record on that. 8 EU-related referenda since 1972. I think that's testimony to the level of debate that goes on in Ireland. I think it makes Ireland unique in terms of its dynamic and its evolution. Irish people are broadly, the population, public opinion is broadly favourable towards the European Union. We don't have the same level of the issues around Euroscepticism. We have healthy debate for sure. We have some Euroscepticism. There's a core no vote in any referendum that's put out there. But we are not on par, and it's important to point this out to audiences outside of Ireland, that the sort of conversation, narrative that we hear around Europe in our nearest neighbour is not something that is reflected in Ireland. That strain of Euroscepticism tends to present itself differently. It's not the same thing. There's a broadly positive attitude towards the European Union in terms of Ireland's identity and how it has evolved over the years. For what it's worth, opinion polls, and presumably they're worth something because that's all we ever seem to organise our lives around these days. Opinion polls will tell you that between 80 and 85% of Irish people are broadly favourable towards the Ireland remaining in the European Union. 83% thereabouts believe that we have profited from membership. Take it as you wish. I've never been polled ever about anything. I often wonder who these pollsters ring. I've never met anybody who's been polled, but I believe it. Okay, so it's 85%. But seriously, there is a positive strain there in terms of our relationship and our view on it. I want to say a word just flowing from that into what I call Ireland in recovery. And bear with me, because essentially this is related as well to what the kind of conversation we're having around Europe at the moment. If we take Ireland as an example. You will all have read, I know, and heard a lot about the unparalleled economic crash that happened in Ireland circa 2008. In November 2010, at the height of that crisis, or the GFC, as the Australians would have it, the height of the GFC, Ireland entered an EU-IMF support programme. The situation was not pretty. We had budget surpluses which were suddenly turned into double-digit deficits. We had unemployment that rose from 4% to 14%. We had a banking system that effectively collapsed and had to be rescued, and is still being rescued at enormous cost to our citizens and with dramatic consequences for our national debt and indeed for our whole national mood. All of this, I hasten to add, took place before many of the European or EU mechanisms that we have now built in the meantime, before they were put in place. We like to think now, a number of years on from that, 2.5 years on, we as a member state are on the road to recovery. We've done a lot, but there's still a lot to do. But just a couple of facts to back it up. The Irish economy is expected to grow in 2013. This will be, if we achieve this, and we're confident that we will, this will be our third consecutive year of growth. Interestingly, along with Germany, good company, we are one of the very few Eurozone countries which expect economic growth this year. Our exports are booming. Government spending is under control. Foreign direct investment is vigorous. And two-way trade, incidentally, between Ireland and Australia now stands at about $2.3 billion. Our fiscal position has also improved. We have made considerable progress in tackling our debt levels. And if I can get technical about this for a moment, essentially what we are doing, we're going through a process at the moment of changing or replacing short-term emergency support from the central bank against promissory notes with the longer-term, more affordable, longer maturities with the longer-term finance. This we expect, and we're confident, will reduce the burden on Irish taxpayers and should also inject stability and confidence back into the economy. But this new stability and confidence, believe me, has been hard-won. Well, how hard-won? Well, very hard-won, in fact. We are currently implementing budgetary adjustment of the order of 20% of GDP over the period 2008 to 2015. That hurts. Most of it's done, and we are on track to hit the 3% GDP target, deficit target by 2015. We like to think it's paying off to the extent that we can engage these things. Very often people look at the yield of long-term government bonds, and on that criteria, bond yields are now down about 4%. Remember, they were at a high of about 14% a number of years ago. They were effectively excluded from the market. But we can deduce from this, if this is the criteria by which you measure success, that market confidence is returning in the sovereign. We have honoured all of the EU IMF commitments through 8 distinct analyses by the Troika. And we expect to exit the EU IMF program before the end of this year. So while much has been achieved in terms of recovery, like many others in the European Union, we are labouring under the weight of bank-related debt. And this is, in turn is affecting our ability to come out of recession. In normal classical economics, you would expect to be out of recession by now, weighed down by the burden of debt like many other member states. It's not immediately obvious. And believe you me, austerity, we hear a lot about it, austerity, we should not forget, brings a lot of pain and a lot of suffering for many, many families, and it continues to do so. But Europe, like Ireland, like Europe, needs to steady itself after this crisis-driven period, and it needs to return to stability. I suppose it's no surprise then that the theme of Ireland's presidency is stability, jobs, and growth. Just here somewhere. See, it's written there, so it must be true. Stability, jobs, and growth. It is, as you young people say nowadays, it's a no-brainer, really. You don't have to sit around and think about it for too long. It is, as one of my sons would say, bleeding obvious. So, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get the European economy back on track by improving its global competitiveness, promoting economic growth, and by creating jobs. I'll touch on some of these things as we go through, rather than giving you a list of all of the wonderful things that we're going to achieve in 6 months, which is necessarily limited. We're trying to drive the agenda along so we can go to the next presidency, just as we did from the previous one. But jobs will figure largely in what I'm talking about today. Unemployment, particularly among young people, is one of the most, if not the most urgent issue facing us in Europe at this point. On the last figures that I have seen, youth unemployment, that's for those of you who are under 25, those of you who are, wherever you are, who are under 25. stands in the EU 27, stands at almost just over 23.5%. So we need to focus on jobs. This is a major social, not just an economic issue. This is a societal issue which needs to be addressed. We need to focus on jobs. As a presidency, we set ourselves the objective, therefore, of addressing youth unemployment in particular. And related to that, we are trying to work towards removing any remaining obstacles that exist towards worker mobility, which, of course, as you know, is a fundamental right been enjoyed by citizens for many, many years. So in there, you will find listed work to be done on the Posting of Workers Directive, Posting of Workers Directive, the recognition of professional qualifications, and so on. The single market, one of these signal successes of the European Union, has been vital for jobs and growth. It remains one of our great success stories. So the next phase, inevitably, of the single market will involve untapping the potential that it offers in this next phase. That would largely be in the whole area of the digital agenda. The digital agenda, in turn, is a driver of competitiveness. It's a sort of source of smart jobs for the future. Why are we pushing it? Because of the jobs relation, the jobs dividend, potentially at the end of it. So you will see a lot in the presidency program about intellectual property rights, cyber security, data protection, high-speed broadband, rollout and web accessibility. These are the jobs of the future. The other main theme that runs through this, and will run through, is something we picked up and we will hopefully deal with by the time we get to the end of the presidency. It is the big deal in terms of what does this presidency deliver, is the MFF, the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, the budget effectively. The next tranche of spending of the MFF. And reaching agreement on an MFF is probably, if we were to pick one challenge, is the greatest challenge which faces the presidency. And it's an area where the presidency can actually make a difference in all of this. It seems self-evident to say it, but let's say it anyway. The Union needs a stable basis on which to work. It needs adequate multi-annual financing. So policies that contribute to sustainable growth and job creation have to be underpinned financially, and that underpinning is found in the multi-annual financial framework. So there it leads into job creation, it leads into growth. So what are the kind of policies that it will, if it's put in place, actually fund? You're looking at areas of education and training, you're looking at research and innovation, you're looking also at the common agricultural policy, common fisheries policy. And as a representative of Ireland, you won't be surprised if I say that the CAP in particular can help to secure sustainable growth and employment, support rural economies, and it also contributes to long-term global food security. Cohesion policy, again, to be underpinned by the MFF, is an important part of it. It is vital if the Union is to continue to address the economic and social disparities that continue to exist across the Union. Research and innovation, driving competitiveness, creating smart jobs. We're focused very, very much on Horizon 2020, as it's now being called, in the context of the overall agreement on the MFF. I itemize these things to get away from the abstract nature of MFF as something which you just need to get done because it's personally or professionally satisfying to get it done. There is a real impact here. There's a real impact in terms of what the Union can actually do. It needs the money to do it, surprise, surprise. It needs the framework within which that money is delivered, surprise, surprise. So we have picked this up. We have gotten agreement. We've gotten agreement at broad agreement at council level. We've brought it to Parliament. Parliament has now set out a resolution, which we agreed a resolution on the MFF, which is effectively its negotiating stance. And we will take the next 2 or 3 months to engage closely with Parliament to ensure that we can deliver on this by the end of the semester. What about stability, governance, economic governance, banking? Clearly, we need stability in the financial sector in terms of our economic governance. If we are to deliver on growth, we need also a well-regulated and a well-functioning financial sector. National responses, frankly, are inadequate. And within that whole rubric of governance and financial governance, the proposals that are now on the table in the whole area of banking union, we believe are key to Europe getting its house in order. We need, through the banking union proposal, proposal was to restore financial stability, and what's particularly important to Ireland, we need through this to break the link between banking debt and sovereign debt. I can come back to that later if you wish. In June last year, the European Council met, Heads of State and Government met, they agreed in principle on the importance of severing that link between the banking and sovereign debt. We see this as key to improving our own sustainability of our adjustment programme. We're determined that that decision of the European Council will actually be implemented. So we are prioritising under banking union as well, prioritising the whole area of strengthening financial regulation. But why? Why do we do this? We do it also to protect the interests of investors and consumers, and ultimately restore confidence, which is sorely lacking. What does it involve, banking union? There are a number of proposals which stand out. One is on the establishment of a single supervisor. This is critical, essentially, will be the ECB when it's done. This is critical for the recapitalisation of banks right across the Union. The Capital Requirements Directive, restoring budgetary discipline, and specifically brokering an agreement with Parliament on economic surveillance and governance measures, otherwise known in the jargon as the two-pack. For those of you who follow the two-pack, will be familiar with the six-pack. There's other stuff as well. If you go through the 365 pages, odd pages, I think it is, of the programme, you'll find there's a lot more in there than that. So I'm not going to deal with them all, but I would just touch on one or two of what I call the other stuff. I'll come back to foreign policy, for starters. But effectively, foreign policy at this point, and again we can discuss this, is now played out through the person of the High Representative and Vice President, Cathy Ashton. We're clearly the expected focus. We're in support. We work with her and support her, but clearly the focus is going to be on Syria, Iran, Mali, and Somalia. And these things choose themselves. There's the President sitting around and saying, well, what are we going to do this time? And certainly Ireland is not sitting around saying, well, how are we going to change the world in this respect? These issues present themselves, and we provide our support to it. In the whole trade area, there is still potential, we believe, to increase Europe's trade with the strategic partners. We have particularly high hopes that we will be able to reach a negotiating mandate for the Commission, agreement on negotiating mandate for the Commission for free trade negotiations with the US. And we expect also to progress negotiations in respect to Japan, India, Canada, and the countries of the ASEAN countries. Enlargement is still going on in the background. For those of you who thought that the European Union had simply become an issue without crisis, or the GFC, enlargement is still working away. One of the great successes, great foreign policy successes, the great leverages of the European Union over the years. On the 1st of May, interestingly enough, in 2004, on the 1st of May 2004, when Ireland was last in the presidency, we welcomed in 10 new member states at that time. It seems a long time ago now, a lot has happened. Croatia will join the 1st of July, but in the meantime, we will continue to advance the work with Iceland, Turkey, Montenegro, and also with Faroe, Serbia, Albania, and Kosovo, at various levels, depending on the point that they are at in the process. So, what have we achieved? Feedback. What have we achieved to date? I'll take a quick look at what we've done to date, what we've got so far, and where we can expect to be, what we expect to happen between now and the end of June. If I come and talk to you at the beginning of the presidency, this would have been an awful lot easier because I could just give you a list of things. I wouldn't have had to account for them. But now, because we're almost April, and it's my fault that it's April, okay? I came here too late. I now have to tell you where have we got to so far, because we're actually at the halfway point at this stage. Well, I'll give you some headlines. In the first 3 months so far, the Union has, with our assistance, we don't take, for a moment, try to take credit for these things, but under our watch, nonetheless, we have achieved a number of things. The multi-annual financial framework, let's call it the MFF, is on track. As I said, we've got an agreement, broad agreement at the political level of Council. Parliament has agreed a resolution. We think we have the basis for going forward on it. Real progress has been made in addressing youth unemployment. I'll come back to that. We have broad agreement in principle on the EU-US trade and investment agreement. The Unified Patent Court agreement was signed in Brussels, and that might sound a little arcane, but believe me, it has taken many, many years to get to that stage. And once the patent court is in place, you begin to see how important that is for the free movement of goods, services, and so on across the European Union. There are people who have devoted their lives to EU patents, and they get it. This is important. Agreement was also reached, interestingly, and you will find this particularly interesting, students of the subject, on the basis of enhanced cooperation around the financial transactions tax. We've also, as I mentioned, we've managed to push forward agreement on economic governance legislation on the two-pack, so broadly speaking, we're in good shape. Just a little bit more detail on some of those. It was at the beginning of February that Council agreed its position in MFF. So let's see what we can get from Parliament. But we believe that the kind of package that has come out of it is focusing in the right areas: youth unemployment, research and innovation, and maintaining solidarity with the regions through cohesion and regional policy. To give you some specifics, the MFF agreement as it stands includes 6 billion euros, like proper money, 6 billion euros for a new youth employment initiative, of which the Youth Guarantee, which you may have heard of, is a part. We're quite pleased about this. We're actually taking the ownership on this Youth Guarantee. If we deliver something on this, we feel that if we ever get around and make a list of achievements, that this will be out there with most of the achievements. Essentially, what does it do? It tries to ensure that those young people who are studying, who are not working, are studying, receive an offer of employment, or continuing education, or an apprenticeship, or a traineeship. We believe it has within it a potential to increase the employment rate, to reduce early school leaving, and to help to lift many young people out of the trap of poverty and social exclusion. I've mentioned the two-pack twice now, so I'm not going to mention it a third time. I've mentioned the financial transactions tax, which is agreed on, pushed forward on the basis of enhanced cooperation. Banking rules. We've considered agreeing with the Parliament on banking rules which we have brought forward, and we expect that these will help or ensure that European banks will hold enough capital to withstand future economic shocks. And we also expect it to enforce greater transparency, to discourage excessive risk-taking, and to, something maybe very low, these rules also include restrictions on bankers' pay, which is always a good thing. That's not an official Irish view, simply mine. In terms of the single market, I've mentioned the Unified Patent Agreement. On the EU-US, I mean, again, you find here that particular member states may bring particular added value to the party. It was only earlier this month, around St. Patrick's Day, that our Prime Minister, Taoiseach, actually discussed this with President Obama in the US, and Obama clearly is looking for a way through in terms of the broader transatlantic trade and investment partnership. So we were happy to add our voice to that and give it some impetus. We've also dealt with the unexpected. You always get the unexpected. Some people usually have to deal with coups, or they have to deal with foreign policy issues. We're having to deal with horse meat. But nonetheless, it's hugely important. Some very good jokes going around about horse meat at the moment. But for those who are involved at the coalface, if I can call it that, it's really not a laughing matter. If there's anything that affects your reputation as a country which exports an awful lot of food, and the food sector is hugely important in terms of delivering a quality product, and this affects all of Europe. Anything that goes to your reputation is frankly very bad news. And we have examples of that going back over the years. But the horse meat scandal, for that is what it is, it was first exposed actually by the Irish Food Safety Authority. It was in January of this year, and subsequently was shown to be a pan-European issue, in fact. But under the guidance of our Minister for Agriculture and the Agriculture Council, They have agreed on control and testing measures in member states, which we are confident, at least, will help to restore consumer confidence, so that the food that we all eat is exactly what it says on the packet or on the tin. Just to conclude, what do we expect between now and the end of June? We expect continuing focus of our resources, at least on the MFF, considerable focus also on banking union, single market and the digital economy. The banking union idea is especially significant for a country like Ireland. I've mentioned the whole area of severing the link between the sovereign and bank debt. But the rescue of the banking sector in Ireland has cost something of the order of 40% of GDP. That in turn, we believe, has helped to contribute to the stability of the European banking system in general. But if we can pull together the European semester process and the greater economic and budgetary coordination of those member states, then we feel we're moving in the right direction. And on R&D, we will push Horizon 2020 and apply our own experience in the area. Just to conclude, you know the limitations, and I know the limitations. I haven't hidden the potential and the limits of what a presidency can actually achieve in the 6 months that are given to us. And equally, you know, the presidency doesn't hold all of the cards. It is a complex, it's a subtle, nuanced leadership role that involves partnerships with member states, with institutions, with the Commission, President of the European Council, Parliament, other institutions, and a whole array of stakeholders. The presidency can't do everything, but it must do what it can. And what we have tried to do is identify concrete proposals in those areas where these proposals can make a real difference. So as we go forward with the work, we try not to forget the essential ideals as to what this whole thing was about. There was a Europe before the crisis, incidentally. There was an EU before the crisis. The EU is not defined by the Eurozone. There is more to it than that. We need to hold on to that. I think that's quite important. We need to find ways to constantly engage the people of Europe and their representatives in European affairs, even if we find difficulty in identifying what is generally called the European demos. But it's ironic and important and nice that we hold the presidency in what is after all the European Year of Citizens, so that may have passed you by, but it is the European Year of Citizens. So I've come to tell you today, it is the European Year of Citizens. So this inspires us and reminds us that this is about citizens, it is about people, it is not simply about member states sitting around in the rarefied atmospheres of working groups or trilogues or whatever else they happen to visit themselves with in Strasbourg or in Brussels or indeed in Luxembourg. European citizens, they enjoy rights, including rights of freedom of movement, of persons, of goods and services across the continent. European citizens, us, we benefit from protection in the workplace, equality between men and women, freedom from discrimination, protection as consumers. These are rights, if you go back to 1973 and before. Many of these rights were simply inconceivable at that time. But I think we feel strongly rather that people in the EU need to understand the rights which their EU citizenship confers upon them, and to know as well how to derive most benefit from it. So that is what inspires us at a high level. At a level below that, we try to implement that in as concrete a way as possible. We're at the halfway point. We stay focused. But I think, as I said at the outset, it's rare that the priorities of the presidency and the priorities of the Union have actually elided to the extent that they've elided in the case of Ireland. Stability, jobs, growth, these are essential to our recovery, to Ireland's recovery, and to Europe's recovery. And it's absolutely clear to us that Ireland's long-term, the presidency's long-term economic and political interests lie in a cohesive EU. And so on that note, I just mentioned to you this, because of some of the material we get in the papers here, you just in conclusion say, let's not just write Europe off just yet. We have still a lot to offer, and we're here to stay. So if I can answer any of your questions, I'd be happy to try that. Thank you. And if there are no questions, that's okay too.
So,
Sure.
Could I ask a perhaps an inconvenient question?
You can ask, but you may get an inconvenient answer.
Well,
this is the danger, you know.
Fair enough. It does strike me that from what you said, we are supposed to take a certain comfort from the fact that Ireland is at the has the wheel, as it were, and that Ireland has been through a financial crisis when, as the government would said, it was neither popular nor profitable.
Yeah.
And here we are again, and Ireland is at the wheel. Would you have any advice, having come through the Irish experience? Not that anybody is listening, but
yeah.
If they were listening, would you have any advice for a wider audience, given our current situation with the euro, the uncertainty, let's call it that, in Cyprus, Greece, and so on?
Thanks for that. No, first of all, I wouldn't have the I don't want to come across as being arrogant in some way of saying that, you know, cometh the hour, cometh the presidency. You know, we take our place in a long line of very effective presidencies that will be followed by very effective presidencies. I'm simply highlighting the point that what we have been through, bloodied and unbowed, is a miniature in many ways of what Europe or the euro area has gone through. So in that sense, we're probably particularly well placed. We've felt the pain. We've had the highs and we've had the lows. We have a particular experience of the euro and of the EU, so that we bring that to the party. I wouldn't translate that or develop that into saying, and ergo Europe is looking to have us. It's not that at all, but simply if we have learned anything from the past few years and from what we're going through, then hopefully we will bring some sensible approaches to the party. And I think not just in terms of the high economics or banking, but in terms of what austerity, because it's an overused word, what austerity actually means to people, what all of that is about. I have lived through, I just developed that for a moment, I never thought that I would live through the day when I'd walk to work in the morning in Dublin and listening to the radios, I'd go in to hear that the night before we came within that of the ATMs being closed down. That's something that happens in faraway countries of which we know little, usually in Latin America. Okay? And suddenly it was brought home. The fragility of that system was brought home. The fragility of the banking system as we know it. The flaws in the design of the architecture of the euro. The flaws, the mistakes that we made in terms of our economic budgetary management. And you know, we put our hands up on that. Yes, we made mistakes. But there were flaws in the broad. It's simply to point out that in a sense, this is, you have a program country in the presidency, and let's not overstate the role of the presidency and what the president can deliver, but it can deliver a sense, a feel, a flavour of where we want to go and how we get there, and it brings its own style to the thing. So I think with that experience, we have a lot to offer. I think there's something very energizing and reassuring for us in a way as well, and this is something I've pointed out in other contexts, that life goes on. We continue to function as a functioning economy. We continue to function as a functioning administration. We continue to be able to play our role on the world stage, whether it is as Presidency of the European Union. Last year we chaired for 12 months we chaired the OSCE, Chairman Office of the OSCE. And in January of this year, we also took our place on the Human Rights Commission in the UN, which is, as those of you are familiar with, basically one element of the Security Council for a 3-year term. So we continue to function, we continue to bring something there. Is the European Union lucky to have us? No. I mean, we're all lucky to have one another, we're all in this together. I can't remember what the rest of your question was. It was about Cyprus and Greece and stuff like that. Look, these are difficult times. These are difficult times. We like to think, and with some sense of confidence, that two things. One, that Ireland will come out of the EU IMF programme by the end of this year. We'll go back to the markets. And that in doing that as well, that we will be the first programme country to exit its program. And I think in every sense of the word, it is unprecedented to have a country in a program. Let's call it a program, most people call it a bailout. A country in a bailout, running the presidency and apparently running it effectively. And that the bailout or program per se is not an impediment to continuing to do a very effective job. Please.
Sorry to dominate the discussion with Irish accents, but interesting you brought Latin America into the ATM equation there. My understanding was that around the time this was happening was around the time they were reneging on their debt to the IMF.
Yeah.
So that's another role I suppose could be discussed. But the question that I'm interested in is that given that the banks throughout Europe, and particularly in Ireland, caused a lot of this pain for the citizens, where does the banking sector sit now in terms of what's happening next? In other words, does the Irish government own those bailed out banks that were bailed out with public money? And when will those banks start to contribute back into the economy?
Next question. Well, this is the question.
Did they get away with it? Is my question.
Well, you know, I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to comment on that. I couldn't possibly. But you know, we had. If the banking system has collapsed, then there was something inherently wrong with it. We can add A and B and get C, and this is what happened. We have recapitalized the banks. We socialized the debt. We recapitalized the banks.
Yeah. And will they pay that money back? Is the question.
Well, if they become profitable, and there are certain constraints on them in terms of already built into the system in terms of the percentages that are already paid back to the exchequer over the amounts that are made available to them. I think, and it's not to avoid your question. Well, I am avoiding your question. Of course, I'm avoiding your question.
So those.
How dare you ask such a question? It's an outrage. No, I think what is actually a more immediate concern at this point is when will they start lending again?